A very good morning and good to see you. Happy new month. It's the 1st of March 2023. Now, the 3rd of March was proclaimed as the World Wildlife Day by the United General Assembly on the 20th December 2013 during its 68th session. Now, the 3rd March was selected to signify the day on which signature to the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild, Fauna and Flora cities was appended in 1973. Uganda ceded to the cities on 18th July 1991 and effectively came in force on 16th April 1991. Now, the World Wildlife Day, designated to celebrate and raise awareness of the world's wild animals and plants. And the day presents an opportunity for Uganda to celebrate the unique and diverse forms of wildlife, to raise awareness of the numerous benefits to Uganda and the humanity at large. At the same time, the day reminds us of the urgent need to protect and preserve the nation's wildlife and to step up to fight against wildlife crime, which has wide-ranging economic, environmental and social effects. Now, this year's celebration will be under the theme Partnerships for Wildlife Conservation. And in studios with me to discuss this and more, I have Dr. Jennifer Talbot from the partners working with USAID. We have Mr. John Samuel Mwanda, the Executive Director, Uganda Wildlife Authority. We have Mr. Basal Ajar, the Director, Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, and the Director is representing the Minister, Honorable Minister, who is out of the country on national duties. I'm Andrew Chamagin, and welcome to the show. We're talking the World Wildlife Day. Good morning, my panel.
Good morning.
That was mouthful. Oh, good. I'm grateful that we're having this conversation. To start with you, Edie, we want to understand, what is the landscape like for wildlife from the global perspective, the regional perspective, and the national perspective?
Thank you, Andrew, for having us here this morning. Indeed, as you mentioned, we'll be celebrating the World Wildlife Day this Friday. The celebrations are going to be in Tororo. We expect His Excellency the President to be the chief guest.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the outlook of the wildlife conservation, when we talk World Wildlife Day, most people are thinking elephants and lions alone.
Correct.
But we actually are also looking at the plants, because without the plants, the animals would not survive. So we are looking globally at what we have there in the wild as plants and animals, and how they interact and how we interact with them. The global outlook is that the numbers are going down, whether ocean fish and wildlife, whether you're looking at animals and plants in the parks that we've conserved, but more importantly in what we call the public land, the land that belongs to you and me all over the world, because our populations are growing. We want more food. Because we want more food, we are clearing more area. As we clear more area, we are killing the plants, we are removing the habitats for the animals. And when we do that, then we cause a problem for ourselves. There is the whole issue of global warming. We are having the climate being very unpredictable, with very long droughts and then extremely heavy rains that lead to floods. That is part of the challenge that we have worldwide. If I could come back home in Uganda, it's still the same problem, but a little bit different in that in Uganda we have the wildlife numbers increasing, and we have the human population increasing even at a greater rate.
It's worrying.
And that combination is worrying and is very difficult to manage, because as the wildlife numbers go up, they tend to get out of the areas where they are protected and get into people's land. But even look at Kampala. If you ask anybody in Kampala, the number of monkeys in Kampala seem to have gone up. I think that they haven't. But what has happened is that we've gone to every little forest, wherever it is, including the wetlands, and by going there and clearing these wetlands, the habitats for our animals are removed. And so now they go and they're even trying to enter our kitchens. So that is part of the problem. But globally, it's a problem. Uganda, we've done very well with the numbers, but we haven't done well with the habitats. And that makes a challenge for us.
That is a worrying one.
Yes.
When I come to you, Basal, from the ministry perspective, when you hear all these figures coming from the ED and the population going up and how we actually misusing the land and the resources we have in terms of wildlife, what comes in your mind as a ministry?
Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. Like you made it clear in the introduction, I'm seated here to represent the minister who is not around. Substantially, I'm the director at the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities. The World Wildlife Day that we are going to commemorate on the 3rd, one is to tell the nation the major milestones that we have done in as far as conservation is concerned, and the ED alluded to that. Secondly, to create awareness to the general population. We need to appreciate in terms of cultural, socio-economic and ecological benefits that we get from the wildlife is important. We also highlight the key challenges that affects conservation of biodiversity and also to bring out the key things that government is doing. So what comes out in my mind when the ED talks about the human-wildlife conflict, we need to enhance one collaboration, just like the theme says, partnership for wildlife conservation. We need to appreciate that conservation of wildlife is a responsibility that comes to everybody's table, because as humans we benefit from wildlife. In benefit, we get food, in terms of health, ecological benefits, clean air and everything. From government perspective, government comes with the enabling laws, the legal and regulatory framework that allows us to protect the wildlife. You're well aware that there's a Wildlife Act 2019 which guides on conservation of different biodiversity, and recently government came with the regulation for benefit sharing, because the local communities that support in protecting the wildlife, or the community that's neighboring the protected areas, need to benefit from the resources, but also from the revenue that is generated from protected area. So there should be laws that regulate such. That's an important element. And also move and mobilize the partnership. We are going to talk about USAID, the World Bank, European Union, local communities, local leaders. All this would come, and then we galvanize efforts towards protecting wildlife.
That makes a lot of sense. Dr. Jennifer, when you hear all this, you're talking about partners, especially when it gets to conservation. What do you do as a partner in Uganda to make sure that this agenda is actually achieved?
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, ED, and thank you, Director. It's an honor for us as the Biodiversity for Resilience activity funded by USAID to partner with the ministry and to partner with the Uganda Wildlife Authority to address some of these issues that they've been speaking about. We also partner with communities, we partner with private sector. I think that partnership in this case is the only way to move forward. As the ED said, a lot of the habitat loss is occurring outside of the formal protected area, so outside of the parks, outside of the reserves, outside of the central forest reserves. It's on community land, it's on private land. So I think that's the areas where we're trying to support, is working with communities and private sector, and of course outside of these formal protected areas, to see if we can try to conserve the habitat that is being converted.
And when you're in the communities, Jennifer, what do you see? Do the communities seem to understand what tourism is and conservation is? Do they understand how wildlife can change their lives with a blink of an eye?
I think in certain areas, I think yes. I think where tourism is well developed and community members have jobs in tourism, I think they see the direct benefits. In some cases, there are other benefits coming in from wildlife, such as in sport hunting, for example. There are some benefits coming in from that. So I think where community members see a direct economic benefit, they understand. But as the ED was saying, the human-wildlife conflict is really large and is increasing as you have more animals and more people. And so if I'm a poor farmer in a village and the elephants have just come through and eaten my crops, I don't have much patience for for wildlife or for conservation.
Correct.
So I think that's one of the key issues that we're trying very hard to address with the communities and together with the UA teams in the field.
Edie, when I hear these, there is a bit of disconnect from the communities at times as a country that we don't seem to understand wildlife entirely, because we, as Ugandans, we understand only tourism, yet it's kind of broader. Do you mind shedding for us the light in a different context to expand for the viewer to understand it even better, what wildlife is, just beyond the animals, beyond the buffaloes, beyond the giraffes, beyond the leopards you actually have. But what is wildlife, and how best can we leverage on that to change our livelihoods as communities? Because that's the partnership I'm trying to look for.
That's a very, very nice question. I just love it.
Yes.
But before I go there, let me talk about the fact that the communities are our biggest partner.
Okay.
In as far as wildlife conservation is concerned. It's often very nice to talk about USAID and you know, all the others, but the real core partner in wildlife conservation is the community, because they are the ones with the habitat for the plants, for the animals, and if they decided to clear, you won't have the wildlife that you're talking about. So that is important. Now that we have the wildlife and the communities are the ones managing these habitats, what is it in for them, in for you and me? And for me, I would say I have unemployment. Yes. So I am employed because of wildlife. And there are many others who are employed. Uganda Wildlife Authority, for example, at the moment has over 3,000 staff employed. Their families are depending on this resource called wildlife. But when we start talking tourism in this country, the real people who come to Uganda for tourism, probably 90% of them are coming because they are going to visit one of the national parks.
Correct.
And if they are visiting, when we talk tourism, you need to look at the chain. They are going to land in Entebbe, okay? They have paid the ticket. We have employees at the airport. We are getting tax as a government. The moment they arrive, they will need a vehicle to take them to their hotel. That vehicle is driven by somebody's son. One chamaga, exactly. And he has a family that is depending on the income he's going to get from there. But he's also going to buy fuel. And there is somebody employed at the fuel station. And the fuel is providing taxes to government. And you go to a hotel. And then you drive to a national park. And then you are eating and sleeping. And at each of those places, there is somebody employed. There is a product being sold. So there is a whole chain of an economy around wildlife that we need to remember. Actually, I think pre-COVID, we were contributing about 9% of GDP into the economy of Uganda from tourism. But tourism, as I said, was depending on wildlife. So if we harness this wildlife, we protected it, we worked in partnership with everybody, we should be able to improve the economy of this country. Just invest a little bit more. We'll be able to improve the economy of this country in a much bigger way because of the wildlife that we have.
I love it, Edie, but let's dig a bit deeper.
Yes.
This is tourism. Some have come to watch the birds, the animals and all. But wildlife goes into the fauna.
Yes.
We have rare species.
Yes.
Do our communities understand these rare species? Do they understand how much they should be protected? Do they understand how to farm them, for instance, so that the wildlife is not only there is, in animals, just the animals and all, but going into the faunas and all, do our communities understand that kind of context to the conversation?
There are those who understand, yes. But the majority of our people are thinking about the food on their table
Today.
for lunch today. So it is you and I that need to go to them and explain. But it's not, shouldn't be a matter of words. We should be showing the real benefit.
Practical.
Or practical benefit. So for example, the Biodiversity for Resilience project that USAID is funding, that Jennifer is talking about, that project is dealing with communities, able to show them that actually there is value in wildlife. They are helping them to develop businesses around the wildlife. And that's what we need to do, to put a value on this wildlife. Not just talk, you know, wildlife is nice. No, that will not work. What works is bring tangible benefit that people can actually relate to, and they are able, you know, my mother, my father in the village should be able to see that there is a value. There is a value to this wildlife, and I am benefiting from it. Otherwise, if it is my director benefiting and I am not, then
you're not concerned about
exactly. So we need to bring that home to every home that has wildlife. And by the way, there are lots of other things apart from tourism that we can do. We have wildlife use rights where people can keep wildlife either as pets, or they can do ranching, or they can do farming. It hasn't really caught up nicely yet, but we have a few people and organizations that are already engaged, and we are working with, and we believe with time it will spread beyond just the few, so that there are more people involved in the wildlife business.
Director, when you hear the ED, the Amanda, saying that there are a few people who understand this conversation, we want to understand, what is the ministry doing in terms of awareness and sensitization on the ground in communities? I'm a typical Muntu hours. I love to go to communities. I would like to know, from your strategic agenda, what are you doing to make sure that this sensitization and awareness is grounded in communities, and you're onboarding more people to have the same school of thought, like a few, the few, a handful, like Edie says, who understand this agenda?
Yeah, there are three strategic areas. So you asked about awareness, but I want to broaden the discussion.
Please.
There are three strategic areas that that government in general is looking at in as far as the tourism sector is concerned. One is increased marketing of the different products. When you're talking about marketing, you are creating awareness. Because one, both the domestic and foreign or people outside Uganda need to appreciate the diversity of resources we have in terms of the wild fauna and wild flora. So we talk about different resources, we increase on marketing, we create awareness. The second most important thing is diversity to diversify on the products. You say that majority of people, when you talk about wildlife, people to think about the elephants, the lion, animals, and the those. But we have resources beyond the animals. Like you said, we have the different fauna or the different types of plants. We have cultural diversity that we need to look into. We have different opportunities for religious or faith-based tourism. That should be brought out broadly. Now, in terms of creating awareness, you will appreciate that within the tourism sector, there are 5 institutions. One is Uganda Wildlife Authority, which is mandated to protect or conserve animals within the protected areas and within the country. Then there is Uganda Wildlife Education Conservation Center. And commonly we call it the Tentebe Zoo. So when you go within the OWEC, they have a mandate, one, to keep the animals which are rescued, but also to do a lot of outreach. They go to schools, they have the wildlife club in different schools, in different communities. They need to reach out to everyone to appreciate the benefit of nature, but secondly, to have a joint responsibility that we have worked to conserve these animals. The third institution, which is very relevant in this case for wildlife, is Uganda Wildlife Research and Training Institute. Much as they train professionals who should come and help in conservation, they also have a duty to do research. Because you're not going to conserve biodiversity, you're not going to conserve the habitat when you're not grounded with empirical information and research which comes from science. So the duty of awareness is embedded in all the institutions that I mentioned, and it also comes to the ministry. So you create awareness, you let them know the negative consequences that come when you don't conserve the environment, because for us, we all benefit in the same ecosystem.
Correct.
Yes.
Dr. Jennifer, when Edie was submitting, you said that there are some business models partners are trying to teach the communities on which they can leverage on to improve their livelihood. Tell us about that when you go on the ground, and how do you do this?
So I think it's very interesting what ED and the director were saying about tourism, and I think tourism really is an engine of growth and is based a lot in Uganda and on wildlife, and Uganda has really done a fabulous job of capturing that, and working with the private sector and tourism, and then also building, as you said, on the cultural aspects as well. I think we all know that tourism can also be very volatile. We saw during COVID, we saw during Ebola, we've seen in the past with unfortunate terrorist attacks in Nairobi, for example, that a simple event, or even an Ebola outbreak in Liberia, can
flip everything.
Right, can flip everything. So I think that we need to push forward with tourism, but also recognize that there are limits and that it is volatile. So at the same time, I think it's also important to really focus on what are critical livelihoods for communities who are living in these habitats, in these ecosystems, living with wildlife, living next to protected areas, living outside of forests, that they can really benefit and have tangible benefits, even if there is no tourism. So I think of some examples, sort of like agroforestry, for example. So encouraging intercropping of specific tree species that can then be used and harvested by communities, intercropping those with crops. Maybe these tree species and these crops will be ones that are not palatable to wildlife. Therefore, an elephant might come through and might not choose to eat the chia seed, for example, because it's not a palatable crop. Yet the farmer can then get some economic benefits from selling that, and therefore be more tolerant and willing to let the elephants walk through their fields if it's not completely decimating their livelihoods. I think also a key aspect to supporting livelihoods in these habitats is working closely with the private sector, so that you're not just focused on small little livelihoods at a very, very local level, but helping farmers and producers link with these larger companies who have regional, national, even international markets, so that they can get good prices for some of these products, whether they're agroforestry products or whether they're non-animal palatable products.
Edie, when you hear the issue of private sector,
yes,
I want us to jump in there. Has the private sector understood the magnitude of the wealth we have at hand? And if so, why are we not digging deep as a country? Because I'm looking for partnerships in one way or the other. How best we can dig into this digger.
Yes, I believe that actually the private sector is very well aware of the issue of wildlife and the benefits they can get from it. I think, however, that we have focused more on the business side. So for example, I joined Uganda Wildlife Authority 5 years ago this month as executive director.
Happy anniversary. We should be having a cake somewhere.
Yes, yes. In 3 weeks' time, we'll be celebrating. So when I joined, I think the Uganda Association of Tour Operators, Association of Uganda Tour Operators, OTO, had about 200-300 people, companies. Now they are in the 500s. UTB had a few people who had been cleared to run tour operations. They are about 500 now. So you already see...
Even with COVID at play?
Even with COVID at play, people continue registering their companies in getting themselves to share this part of the cake called tourism. The problem we have, though, is that we focused on that side that is giving us resources, money, and we've not looked at where is this money coming from, because we need to protect that resource.
Oh, yeah.
And that protection is what requires us to do the partnerships with Uganda Wildlife Authority, with the ministry. The director mentioned 3 of the key institutions, but we also have the Uganda Hotels and Tourism Training Institute that trains people who help us in the hotels, but also the guides that take the visitors to the parks. We also have the Uganda Tourism Board that does the marketing. Yeah. So the 5 of us working with the ministry as our supervisor, we work together, and awareness is at each of our different levels because we must create the awareness. And then we need to engage the partners, institutions like USAID, and the partners they bring on board. There are others like Wildlife Conservation Society, Uganda Conservation Foundation, African Wildlife Foundation. All those are international NGOs and many more. They are coming in to give us support. And then locally, at our community level, we have community-based organizations. Now, the majority of them are forming themselves because they think they will get some funding from either Uganda Wildlife Authority or government, yes, or some of the donors.
You are aware of the scam on the ground.
So it is upon us, yes, as Uganda Wildlife Authority, as the ministry, as the development partners, to actually
streamline.
Yes, help these people to appreciate that, you know, it's not just about getting the money, but if you did your work well, you protected your area well, there is a business going to flow.
Correct.
Not only this year when the donor money is there, but 10 years, 20 years to come.
Yeah.
And really that is what we need to be driving at. And I like NBS, NTV, because you're giving us the opportunity to speak to the people, so that they know,
they understand
and they understand this. And we really need to continue this conversation, not only because we have World Wildlife Day on Friday,
but even other days.
Exactly. Exactly.
Director, this brings me to a question. Do you think this is something to do with the mindset about our population, with what the ED is alluding to when it gets to people understanding the business dynamics about this entire agenda? Is it a question of the mindset? And if so, what is the ministry doing to change that? And what are you doing as a ministry to support the private sector in the wildlife and conservation business?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Like you said, it's a mindset issue. Just flashback about 10 years back. If you talked about tourism, what would quickly come into your mind is to see Mzungu, like my sister Jennifer seated here, moving around, and those are the people who are tourists. Andrew never thought that himself and his family would be a tourist.
Yes.
And
Should stick it.
Yes. And that's the thinking most Ugandans have. They think when you talk about tourism, it's not us. It's a mindset that we are changing. And I think they are very good. They are very good results. In the year 2020. If you compare the number of Ugandans, or the total number of people who visited protected areas, it went up to over 360,000 individuals in the year 2020. Compared to 2019, which is our peak time, that's the time when tourism revenue actually reached about $1.6 billion US. In 2019, which was our best year, the total number of people who visited protected areas was about 320,000, meaning there's an increment of about 40,000 people. Now, the good news is that 70% out of the 360,000 were Ugandans. Now, that tells you that it's a concerted effort to change the mindset and for us to appreciate that we are all tourists.
In all those years, I remember the programs you had Tulambule, you had that campaign of Tulambule,
yes.
We had Tambula. There were particular regional campaigns that were actually crafted and they were customized.
Exactly.
Personally, it pushed me to take my family into the parks and to understand this, because your ministry was clear that go out and be a part of this. Yes.
So, and remember this, Tulambule and most of those programs had gone down a little bit.
Yes.
But it recovered back in 2020, now in 2013, 2022, and now 2023. There's a bigger drive to send people out there to change the mindset for us to appreciate. But also when you talk about what are we doing to support the private sector, because we say tourism sector is private sector driven.
Correct.
Although government led, but private sector driven. Because we have all the tour operators and all these people moving around to market the country and talk about the different products. So what government is doing, I'm sure you're well aware of the project that we are doing together with the World Bank, the SEDEP project, the Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Project. It has many other components, among them to improve the different infrastructure, to the different products that we need to come to. But specifically for private sector, government in discussion with the World Bank has put aside some little grant financing to the tune of about $1.5 million to support private sector, to market the country, to think about different products, to integrate technology into marketing tourism, because me and Mwanda here, we cannot move from place to place.
Correct.
It is now easy to do it on Facebook, Instagram, you know, Twitter and all that. So I'm happy to announce that a few companies have now started benefiting from this grant, which is put aside from the World Bank to support them in promoting the country.
And I love when you say a few companies, then what becomes of the others who actually need the same capacity building in terms of training the operators and all? What becomes of it?
It's a competitive grant. The call for application is put out there. You put your application. There's a team that review the ones that qualify for financing, given support. And then those who don't qualify, there's always a conference. There's a technical team that brings the other companies and say, look, the priority areas were A, B, C, D. The reason why your proposal never went through, you had these weaknesses.
Okay.
Then you're given a chance to improve, and then you work on them.
And I think, Director, what you needed to add on is that the process is not over.
It's not over.
Okay.
Yes, the money is still available.
It's still available.
Because so I'm rooting for those others.
After every 3 months, after every 3 months, there's a call. After every 3 months, there's a call.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a project that we think should support private sector so well.
Wow, I love that. Jennifer, when you hear all this, you want to supplement on that?
So I just wanted to go back to something that the ED said about when a tourist comes into the country and that the various different employment opportunities, the value chain of that. So I think that the challenge now is how do we enhance that whole value chain so that it gets down to the very communities who are living with the wildlife right next to the protected areas.
Correct, yes.
So I think that's if some of that can trickle down or can get down to those communities who are living with elephants raiding their crops, living on the edge of the forest every day, then once they have some benefits, then I think we can begin to see some more buy-in from communities, and they really will want to conserve the forest, want to conserve the wildlife. So I think that's a challenge for all of us as we move forward.
Correct.
And I think tourism is one excellent way, especially you have lodge owners who are located in the landscapes. They have community groups who are benefiting, community members who are employed. I think that's critically important. And I know that you both are well aware that the government also has a very strong role to play in encouraging the private sector to ensure that these benefits get all the way, all the way down there. And from our work, we then work with the communities at the ground level to help them be ready and
when
able when these opportunities come, and to understand that these people are coming to work with them. And so I think that if we can really work along this whole chain, I think that we'll really be able to make some good progress.
Let me allow the director first, then you'll come in later. Yes.
No, the challenge mentioned is a very positive challenge. How do we ensure that everybody benefit within the whole value chain? One, like I mentioned, government came with a law, with a regulation, which says that whatever revenue that we generate from a protected area, for example, Queen Elizabeth or Marksham Falls National Park, we know the primary person that keeps the environment or stay there with the habitat is the local community. So 20% of the revenue which is generated should be plowed back to the community. And this comes to community schools, water points, health centers and all that. That's a good one. But secondly, from within the community, now you pick guides If there are those who have the minimum qualification, train them. You train them, and they become guides to the tourists, and it helps in a way. There were areas where there's you find that there's no alternative livelihood resources. People look at the park or a protected area as a source of revenue. There are people who are going to hunt there for meat. There are people who want to generate some little money because they are selling the bush meat. So there are alternative livelihood enterprises, entrepreneurship projects, which is put within the community areas. ED here has been trying to support apiculture, beekeeping within the community areas, so that they're able to survive. In some areas, in some communities, find that they are given some area where they can plant tree, the tea. Now, tea helps in two ways. One, when you harvest and you're members of the community, you can get some little money. But at the same time, it helps in restraining some animals from moving from the protected area into community areas. So those should be enhanced with different partners so that many communities can benefit from it.
Yes, Edie.
I wanted to give a specific example on where we have had a change in mindset of
in the communities.
Yes.
Okay.
If you went to either Bwindi or Mugahinga, any of those parks, and you talk to the communities, they have seen the money trickle down. They have benefited from projects, they have benefited from employment of various types, whether with the UA or with the tour operator or lodge owner, or even doing their own handcrafts.
Yes, I've seen that in Chimpundu.
Yes,
I went in Chimpundu there.
And being able to actually sell them. So around Bwindi, Mugahinga, we've managed. I already see an improvement of the conditions around Queen Elizabeth as well, because of the many lodges that are on Chichwambe escarpment and around Chikorongo. We already seeing changes in attitude of the communities. So if we could have some of these trickle down to all other protected areas, we should be able to get to the mindset change that we want. Right now, we are working with the communities around Ajai Wildlife Reserve, across the Nile, north of Pakwach. And we are telling them we want to bring back the rhinos. And they are saying, come. And we've started the discussions. And you can see the excitement in the communities, because they believe if you have the rhino there, you will have the visitors, they will have employment, they will be able to sell their products. And so there is already encouragement that we are moving slowly but surely to changing the mindset and getting people directly involved into wildlife conservation.
Jennifer, if you want to tap into that real quick.
I just wanted to say that I think these examples are excellent examples, and they're based on what we call charismatic megafauna, right? Gorillas, rhinos, these are big, physically big animals that are well known, they're endangered, they will draw tourists. And so I think where this is possible, it's excellent, and I think communities can get very excited. I think the challenge is, how do we take that enthusiasm, then a model, and take it to other areas where we don't have the big charismatic, the charismatic megafauna that will draw the large, the large numbers of the foreign tourists who are paying, who are willing to pay large amounts of money. So that's for all of us. I think,
Edie, that's what I wanted actually to see the first context where I said, can we dig deeper?
Yes.
Please go deeper.
Yes, we can dig deeper. I already gave those examples, okay? Yes. Now, we don't have the megafauna in Pianupe Wildlife Reserve.
Correct.
What have we done? We've gone and picked 29 giraffe. We have moved them in Pianupe. They are already multiplying. We will get people move and visit Pianupe. We'll get businesses around there because of the numbers we've put there. And we should be able to do that in other places, as long as, for example, Matheniko and Bokora, there are two wildlife reserves that are connected between Moroto and Kotido. They are along the road, one on the left, one on the right. Yes. So those two, right now, the reason we don't have anything happening there is insecurity. But the moment we deal with the insecurity in that area, we should be able to move some wildlife there. And if we do, And it is also resident wildlife that is just failing to be free because it knows if you are free, your head goes.
Of course.
So the moment we're able to bring security into that place,
Yes.
we should be able to bring some mega fauna there.
Yes.
And there are lots of birds.
Yes.
The birders will have a fantastic
That'll
time
be a good
there.
thing for them.
You don't need a mega fauna there. You just need to tell the birders there are birds here.
We're
We're
already there.
he will go and spend 2 weeks.
That's amazing to the communities.
Yes, and that is money that actually ends up in community pockets along the way.
The Director, as we're coming to the end of this conversation, I want to pick your mind. What does this theme this year mean to you as a ministry? Partnerships in conservation.
Yeah, partnership in conservation of biodiversity. If you look at partnership, you look at partnership at international level. Like rightly you mentioned that it is a UN assembly that declared this day,
Correct.
the World Wildlife Day. And at international level, you have a body that regulates the trade in wildlife and wildlife parts. That's called the CITES, Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Fauna and Flora. So at international level, you need to partner to see that you combat illegal trade, because that gives a fertile ground for poaching. There's also partnership with the CBD, Convention on Biological Biodiversity Resources. But when you come at local level or national level, national regional level, we have now common policies and laws which is coming within the East African community areas. We are trying to develop a common policy that regulate utilization and promotion of the wildlife resources. Then at the local level, we have different NGOs, we have CBOs, we have local communities and all that. But when you talk about partnership and activities which are aligned to commemorate the day, number one, we had the Conservation Conference. Now, Conservation Conference was bringing partners from the academia, people who are doing research. Here, when we talk about the major challenges, one of the things we are talking about is habitat loss. And when there's habitat loss, for you to restore and rehabilitate the habitat, you must be equipped with scientific information. So the Conservation Conference attracted different researchers from Makerere University, many other universities. And for them, they gave their research output. They said, for us, in terms of conserving the natural resources, these are the issues. These are the recommendations. That's important. The second level was...
How I hope government follows the recommendations.
No, it does. It does. And maybe to bring to your attention, government, or government through Uganda Wildlife Authority, calls out now solid researchers to come and research in key thematic areas.
That's nice.
One of the biggest challenges we face is what is called invasive species. These are species which are coming to invade the natural habitat and spoil it. So you cannot call researchers, finance them, and don't use the recommendation. That was there. The second one was to do what is called to bring school competitions, where we involve the primary school, secondary schools, and tertiary schools. Because as we talk here, the people tomorrow that should promote nature and biodiversity are those kids in school. Yes. So we had lots of school competition to interest the young people and build into the day. These are activities that is preceding the World Wildlife Day. We also had the Crane Festival. On Monday, I was in Zimbabwe, and we had many partners again gathered there. We are talking about conservation of the natural habitat for the grey-crowned crane. We call it the crested crane, which is our national bird. It's important that we make it everybody's job, a concerted effort, so that we protect the environment or the nature where we stay. We had a symposium at the Uganda Museum called the Uganda Apes Symposium. Again,
I saw it. It was beautiful.
Again,
how you chose the venue? It was amazing.
It attracted many other people. We had researchers come from the University of Michigan, South Africa, Makerere, and many other people. Now, this is what we need to build. a series of activities to build us towards commemoration of the World Wildlife Day. And if you look at these different activities, trying to bring everyone on board. We're here now we are appealing to the general population so that we know that conservation of nature and biodiversity is something that calls all of us to take action. Yes.
Wow, I love that.
Yes.
Jennifer, when you hear all this, I was seeing you're drawing through the picture, going through, having all this visualization, which is remarkable. But you as an organization that is dealing with on-ground reality people and communities, what does such a theme to the conservation mean to you?
So when I think about the CBOs and the community groups that we were talking about, I think about the collaborative forest management groups, which are groups of community members who are living outside of forests. I think of these nascent wildlife conservancies, which are the communities living outside on the dispersal areas of some of these parks. And I think of them and the way we're partnering with them, the way they're partnering with UA, the way UA is supporting some of them to be wildlife scouts to help reduce human-wildlife conflict. I think about some of our private sector partners like Karatunga, who's working on tourism up in the north. I think of Kijani Forestry. And I just think of all the individuals who across public, private, community partnerships. And I just see that it really takes everyone working together, a concerted effort. Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks.
Director, Brother Edie, as we're finalizing this, we need to know, where are the celebrations going to be as we're going to celebrate? Some of us would like to be there. What venue is it? Are we going to pay to attend? What activities are going to be there on the real ground?
Yes.
And NTV will carry the live feed. I understand that it's part of what we have to do that day. But for those to know, and the country to know where the celebrations are going to be.
We are all traveling to Tororo.
Okay.
We'll be meeting at the, I think it's called King George Stadium in Tororo. It is free entrance. We expect His Excellency the President as chief guest. We'll be having a lot of speeches, but more importantly, we'll be awarding people and organizations that have done well in wildlife conservation. We're giving them awards.
Why Tororo this time?
Why Tororo? We keep moving from one location to another, so that we provide people with information. Because you see, we are talking here in Kampala, in this wonderful studio of yours. Yes, not everybody
can afford
to listen to TV all the time. Yes. So you need to go out there, because when we are in Tororo, the local radio stations will be there. The local person who has the time will come.
And they will own the conversation.
They will own the conversation. They'll say, okay, I didn't know. Then they will also find ways in which to join and act. So we will be in Tororo on Friday. We want to encourage everybody to be there by 9 o'clock, and we'll have a wonderful day. We think that the activities will end by 2 o'clock, and those who travel from up country will be able to get back. But the key thing is that we want to be there. Now, the director talked about the activities that have been done. There is actually another activity today.
Underway.
Organized by Nature Uganda. There is a discussion at Uganda Museum again at 2 o'clock today, where we'll be looking at the state of wildlife conservation in Uganda, but focusing on the role of partnership in wildlife conservation. And so we want to encourage people to come. We'll have great speakers there, and this time it is not the four of us talking to each other.
Everyone will have a chance.
Everybody should have a chance to make a contribution and ask a question.
Thank you so much. You've been such a wonderful panel. We could have had more and more time to go on, but you understand, the TV time flashes so fast.
True.
But to you, the great viewer, we really want to thank you so much for being part of this. Those from Tororo, I understand, I saw a tweet that came in from one person in Tororo, I think, when the ED alluded to it in the start, that the Kwara Dora has actually, rallied them to go. So you had the voice of the Kwara, please be there. There is no better person stronger than him to actually tell you to go and attend. In studios with me, I had a Dr. Jennifer Talbot, who is working with the communities and partnering with the USAID to make sure that these conversations are vibrant. I had Mr. John Samuel Mwanda, the Executive Director, Uganda Wildlife Authority there. We had Mr. Basila Jar, the Director Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities from the Ministry of Tourism. And you, the great viewer. Now, the call to action is to you, my dear Ugandan. Whatever you're doing, the question is, what are you doing to conserve the environment? What are you doing to conserve the wildlife around your area? And what are you doing to leverage on the wildlife within your communities, to improve your communities, to leverage that, to make sure that your livelihood actually changes? Before we actually say that we need government to come in and help us, the question is, what are you doing? And just remind you, no one is coming. Until you take action, you as a Ugandan, that's when we'll join forces. I'm Andrew Chamagero. Good afternoon.